After winning $25 million, I stayed silent and tested my family. My brother mocked, my parents prayed, but my sister did something unforgettable. 4 years ago my life changed forever, but not in the way you might imagine. Yes, I won the lotto. But the true narrative is what happened once I found who my family actually was. Backstory first, because context is important here. I, a 37-year-old guy, living in Columbus, Ohio. And for the majority of my life, I was what you would call an additional sibling. Nor the golden child, nor the black sheep, but the forgettable middle child who no one paid attention to. You know the type. Good grades, avoided trouble, but never just good enough to earn the attention. I worked as a diesel mechanic for a freight company, pulling 11-hour stints in chilly garages to repair big rigs. Roy Miller, my supervisor, was one of those old-school managers who believed that screaming at staff was successful management. The income was just enough to keep a modest roof over my head and a duplex that had seen better days during the Clinton era. Now my family situation was complex. Allow me to introduce you to the cast of characters that made my youth and young adulthood so enjoyable. My older brother, Brad Carter, is 40 and has always been the golden boy. Right after graduation, our parents, Janet and Frank Carter, assisted him in purchasing a construction firm. Not a loan, mind you, but straight-up present money for equipment, down payments and the like. This guy drives brand new trucks every few years, frequently publishes cringeworthy hustle and grind motivational slogans on Facebook, and truly believes he is a self-made success story. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. He acts as if he built his enterprise from scratch, whereas the groundwork was literally laid with our parents' money. Brad is the type of person who casually mentions the cost of everything he possesses. I recently picked up an $82,000 truck. However, you are familiar with what happens when business is booming. No, Brad, I'm not sure how that works because some of us had to start our lives without a trust fund. Then there's my younger brother, Tyler Carter, who is 32 and still lives in our parents' basement. He's always in between opportunities and working on the next big thing, which translates to playing Call of Duty till 3 a.m. Mom delivers him sandwiches sliced into triangles as if he were still 7 years old. Tyler has a knack of making unemployment seem like enterprise. Every few months he has a revolutionary app concept or cryptocurrency scheme that will make him millions. Spoiler alert, none of them work out. My sister, Rachel Carter, is 34 and a single mother who works part-time at a hair salon. She is raising her 9-year-old daughter, Lily, largely on her own after her ex decided fatherhood was not for him and relocated to Phoenix. Rachel struggles to pay rent every month, yet she never complains. She's the sort to post photos of Lily's school projects on Facebook with sentiments like, "So proud of my little artist," while wearing the same 3 dresses on repeat since she spends every spare dime on her child. Then there's me, the invisible one. When I lost my apartment at the age of 29 because the landlord sold the building and did not renew any leases, guess who was not offered a couch to crash on? That's true. The family had a completely finished basement that was unused except for Tyler's gaming setup. Instead, I spent 7 weeks sleeping in my truck in various parking lots around town, showering at the 24-hour gym, and attempting to keep my dignity as my life fell apart. The breaking point occurred 15 months later, when my truck's transmission failed. This wasn't merely an annoyance, it was an existential crisis. Without a truck, there was no way to get to work, and no employment meant no way to repair the truck. I had a $3,600 repair bill and just approximately $200 in my checking account. So I swallowed my pride and contacted Brad, explained the situation, and requested a loan, not a handout, with interest and a repayment plan. I even promised to work extra hours for his employer to repay it. Brad listened to my entire sob story and then began laughing. Not a chuckle but full-fledged laughing, as if I had just told him the best joke he had ever heard. Perhaps, he continued between laughter, it's time to admit that you're not cut out for much. Some people are made for success, while others are built for different purposes. That sentence lodged like a shard in my skull. For years following, whenever something went wrong or I struggled, I could hear Brad's voice telling me I wasn't cut out for it. I ended up taking out a 400% interest payday loan to fix the truck. I spent the next 9 months paying it off, eating ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches to make ends meet. Fast forward to 4 years ago. It was a Friday night in February, and I had just finished one of those shifts that makes you reconsider your life decisions. 11 hours of crawling beneath cold vehicles, getting hydraulic fluid in my hair, and listening to Roy Miller blame me for issues that existed before I arrived. On the way home, I stopped at a petrol station, partly for gas, but also because my truck's heater was acting up, and I needed a few minutes in a warm facility. The store was almost empty, with only me, the cashier, and a trucker grabbing energy drinks for an overnight haul. I had exactly $50 in my wallet, and it had to survive until the next paycheck. Gas cost $37, leaving me just $13 for whatever food I could scrounge together for the weekend. But there, behind the counter, was a collection of scratch-off tickets. Now, I am not normally a gambler. I'd only bought about 5 lottery tickets in my life, and they were all useless. But something about that night stood out. Possibly due to weariness. Maybe Brad's voice was still echoing in my head. Perhaps it was just the cosmic comedy of being 34 and having $13 to my name that prompted me to bring out a $15 bill. "Give me one of those $15 tickets," I ordered the clerk, indicating a game called Millionaires Club. He gave me the ticket and a penny to scratch with. I normally would have waited till I got home, but the truck was cold and the store was warm, so I scratched it right there on the counter. First box cost $600,000. Okay, that is the grand prize sum. There's nothing odd there. Second box cost $600,000. Strange coincidence, but nevertheless. Third box cost $600,000. My heart started beating irregularly in my chest. I read the rules on the back of the ticket twice, and then 3 times. The amount won is the sum of 3 matching amounts. I just won $600,000. But wait, things get better. Because when I looked more closely at the ticket, I realized I was reading it incorrectly. This was not a $600,000 reward. This was a $25 million prize, which after taxes amounted to $16.2 million. I waited there in that petrol station for about 6 minutes, staring at the ticket and waiting for the number to change, or someone to tell me it was a mistake. The cashier asked if I was all right. The trucker inquired whether I needed to sit down. I mumbled something about needing air and staggered outside to my pickup. Sitting in the parking lot, the engine running, I gazed at the ticket until my eyes stung. I photographed it from every possible angle with my phone. I Googled the Lottery Commission's phone number and dialed their 24-hour validation line, putting in the serial number with trembling fingers. "Congratulations," the computerized voice announced. "This appears to be the winning ticket. Please contact us during business hours to start the claim process." I drove home in perfect silence, without even turning on the radio. In my apartment, I placed the ticket in a Ziploc bag, then inside another Ziploc bag, and last in a fireproof safe that I had purchased years ago for crucial documents. Then I sat on my couch, staring at the wall till sunrise. The lottery opened at 8 a.m. on Monday. I arrived at 7:30, first in line, dressed in my cleanest trousers and a button-down shirt I had purchased for a job interview 2 years prior. The process was really simple, but it took a full week. Lawyers, financial advisors, and tax professionals. Suddenly I had a full team of professionals tasked with ensuring that I did not burn away $16.2 million like one of those cautionary tales you see on reality TV. Karen Whitfield, my financial advisor, was a no-nonsense woman who had managed lottery winners for 16 years. "First of all," she said, "the money won't change who you are, but it will reveal who everyone else is." We set up a trust, diversified the investments, created multiple income streams. Conservative estimates place my annual income at roughly $700,000 without touching the principal. Even if I lived lavishly, the money would last indefinitely. But here's the deal. I did not desire to live lavishly, not yet anyhow. I kept going to work all week, living in my terrible duplex, and driving my beat-up Silverado. The only difference was that I found myself smiling at unexpected moments. For example, when Roy Miller yelled at me about productivity goals, or I saw Brad Carter's newest Facebook post about his empire, I had a plan in my thoughts. A strategy to address a question that has been bothering me for years. If I truly needed assistance, if my life depended on it, would my family be there for me? I was about to find out. 3 weeks after winning the lotto, I began my first experiment. I contacted my parents first, thinking I should start with the ones who were supposed to love me unconditionally. "Dad," I said when he responded, "I need to talk with you about something serious." I informed them that my employer had been reducing hours for months and had eventually laid me off. I stated that my truck's transmission was playing up again, and the repair would cost more than the vehicle was worth. I explained that my landlord was raising the rent, and I couldn't afford the increase in unemployment benefits. My father, Frank Carter, listened to the entire story before launching into a lecture about how difficult circumstances shape character and how real men find ways to make things work. My mother, Janet Carter, offered helpful advice such as, "Have you tried praying about it?" and "Everything happens for a reason." When I asked openly if they might help me get back on my feet, perhaps by letting me remain in Tyler's old room for a few weeks while I looked for work, the conversation quickly became uncomfortable. "Son," your dad remarked, "your mother and I are on a fixed income. We can't be supporting grown children who should be supporting themselves." This from the man who had written Brad a $80,000 check for company equipment only 4 years before. "We'll pray for you," Mom said. "But you need to learn to handle your own problems." I thanked them for their time and hung up. 1 down and 3 to go. Brad was next. I contacted him the following evening, around dinner time, knowing he'd be home. "Bro," I said, using my best desperate voice. "I'm really in trouble here." I told him the same tale. Lost a job, a wrecked truck, and an impending eviction. I asked if I may work with his company briefly. Brad remained silent for a long time while I stood up. Then he replied, "You know what? I might have something for you." My heart raced. Perhaps I had misjudged him. Maybe blood was actually thicker than water. "I need someone to clean the office and workshop after hours," he was saying. "It's $9 an hour, maybe 20 hours a week, just so you're not sitting around feeling sorry for yourself." $9 an hour. The federal minimum wage was $7.50, so he was technically generous with the additional $1.50. "Brad," I replied. "I was making $24 an hour at the shop. I've got 15 years of mechanical experience. Don't you have any actual mechanic work?" "Look," he began, and I could sense the patronizing tone creeping in. "Beggars can't be choosers. Take the janitor job or don't, but stop expecting handouts just because we're related. Help." For example, asking for labor was equivalent to asking for charity. I told him I'd think about it, and then hung up. Tyler's response was precisely what I expected. "Dang bro, that really sucks. I'd help if I could, but you know how it is." "You're right, Tyler. I understand exactly how it is. You're 32 years old, and Xbox Live is your largest expense." But Rachel was different. I contacted her last, partly because I didn't want to drag her into this test, and partly because I knew she'd try to help, even if she couldn't afford it. "Oh my God," she said after I finished detailing my fictitious predicament. "Why didn't you call me first?" Before I could respond, she had already made preparations. "Can I come over that night? Did I need to eat? Did I have warm clothing?" "I don't have much," she admitted. "But I've got $70 in my emergency fund, and you can have it. And my couch is always open for as long as you need." $70. This is from someone who had to choose between groceries and gas every week. "Rachel, I can't take your emergency money." "Yes, you can," she said. "That's what family does. We take care of each other." She arrived that same night with the money, a bag of groceries and a jar of leftover spaghetti and meatballs. She set up my couch with her own linens and pillows, gave me a spare key to her house, and encouraged me not to worry about anything except getting back on my feet. That $70 was worth more to me than the entire $16.2 million in the bank. While my family thought I was trying to find a job, I was actually working on something I had been dreaming of for years. Using a shell business, I purchased a modest warehouse on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, just 9,000 square feet of concrete floors and towering ceilings. I repurposed it as a custom truck and off-road vehicle shop. Not just repairs, but whole custom builds, lift kits, performance engines, bespoke paint treatments, and more. It was everything I'd ever wanted to do, but never had the money to do. My first 2 workers were Tommy Alvarez and Luis Ramirez, whom I had previously worked with at the freight company. These were the co-workers who had given me rides while my truck was in the repair, paid for my lunch when I was broke, and treated me like a human being rather than a nuisance. Tommy Alvarez burst into tears when I gave them jobs at double their former salaries, including complete health insurance. Luis Ramirez questioned me 3 times if I was serious before he even looked at the contract. "How did you get the money for all of this?" Tommy inquired, looking around the shop. I told him, "I got lucky," which was technically correct. Setting up the business took 8 months of careful planning, business licenses, insurance, equipment, inventory. I had to learn more about entrepreneurship in 8 months than Brad Carter had learned in his entire pampered life. The nicest aspect was that I remained unseen. Everyone heard about the new shop, but no one related it to me. I was just a guy who disappeared after being laid off, most likely moving to another place to find work. Meanwhile, when it came time to engage with family, I continued to play the struggling unemployed brother. I'd show up at Rachel Carter's house every few days, always looking slightly discouraged, but appreciative for whatever assistance she could provide. She never made me feel like a burden. During one of these trips, she mentioned that Brad's business was beginning to have issues. Customer complaints were mounting, projects were over budget, and he'd had to let 2 people go the previous month. "He's stressed all the time," she explained. "The other day, he snapped at Lily just for being a kid." I told him if he ever talks to my daughter that way again, family or not, we're done. This was an amazing fact. Very fascinating. About 18 months into my unemployed, I did something more satisfying than winning the jackpot. I bought Rachel a home. Not a mansion, nothing to raise suspicions, just a modest 3-bedroom brick home in a quiet neighborhood with outstanding schools. It featured a fenced backyard where Lily could play, a 2-car garage, and, most crucially, it was located in a school district that would provide Lily with options Rachel could never have imagined. I had my financial consultant, Karen Whitfield, structure it through a dummy corporation, and then my lawyer, Jonathan Price, approached Rachel with a narrative about being accepted into a single-mother housing assistance program that covered the entire purchase price. Rachel was suspicious at first. She is not naive, and free houses do not fall out of the sky. However, when Jonathan showed her all of the official-looking documents and explained that she had been suggested by someone who preferred to remain anonymous, she burst into tears in his office. I happened to drive by her and Lily as they were hauling boxes on the day they moved in. Rachel saw me and ran over to the car, literally bouncing with joy. "Can you believe this?" she asked, indicating to the house. "Lily's going to have her own room with a window that looks out on the backyard. And there's a bathtub, not just a shower. I haven't had a bathtub in 5 years." Watching her happiness and knowing I was responsible for it was more valuable than any vengeance I planned. By the 18-month point, Brad's construction company was in deep danger. Social media messages celebrating accomplishment and grinding had completely halted. The brand new truck had been replaced by a 3-year-old model. Word spread across town that his company was missing deadlines and exceeding budget on every job. That's when he called, saying, "Hey little brother," in a tone I hadn't heard from him in years. He employed a phony, nice voice to get what he desired. "I heard you might still be looking for work." I'd been unemployed for about a year and a half, living on what my family assumed were unemployment benefits and odd jobs. "I'm listening," I said. "My business is well, let's call it in a growth phase. Lots of opportunities, but I need someone I can trust to help me take things to the next level. I was thinking maybe we could be partners." "Partners?" That was lavish. "What kind of partnership?" I inquired. "Well, I'd still be the primary owner obviously since it's my company and my reputation on the line. But I could see giving you maybe a 5% stake in exchange for a significant investment." "How significant?" $500,000 should do it. It's a bargain really considering what the company's worth. $500,000? From someone you think is unemployed and desperate? I don't know, man. Bank loan, investor, whatever. You're a smart guy when you apply yourself. Figure it out. The audacity was amazing. And what would I get for this investment besides 5% ownership? Experience. Mainly, learning how to run a real business from someone who's actually successful. Think of it as paying for an education. I said I'd think about it and call him back. Instead, I spent the following week thoroughly investigating Brad's business. Financial documents, customer satisfaction surveys, outstanding debts, and ongoing legal matters. I wanted to learn everything. The results were worse than I had anticipated. Brad owed money to suppliers, had 3 clients threatening lawsuits, and was just 7 weeks away from bankruptcy. His $500,000 investment opportunity was a desperate effort to keep afloat. But here's the thing with desperate folks. They make dumb decisions. I called Brad back and informed him that I had found an investor willing to put up the money. We arranged to meet at a downtown steakhouse to negotiate terms. Brad arrived at dinner in a leased BMW, which likely cost more per month than most people's rent. He selected the most expensive steak on the menu, and spent the first 20 minutes telling me about his recent trip plans and some new equipment he was considering purchasing. I let him speak, ordered a simple lunch, and waited for him to get down to business. So, he finally began, chopping into his $60 ribeye. "Tell me about this investor of yours." "He's someone I've been talking to," I replied. "Very interested in construction, has cash available, and is looking for the right opportunity." "What is his background?" "Various businesses. He prefers to keep a low profile." Brad nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Smart. I'm the same way. So what are we talking about here, the full 500 inches?" "He'd prefer to buy the company outright," I quipped. "Sees more potential in ownership than partnership." Brad's fork came to a halt about halfway to his mouth. "Buy it outright? This company's worth millions." "How much exactly?" "At least 2.5 million, maybe 3.5. I took out my phone, opened my banking app, and slid it over the table. Brad's countenance shifted from confidence to uncertainty to shock as he peered at the screen, which displayed a balance of $10.5 million. I had it appraised, I explained quietly. Professional evaluation, 3 different firms. They all came back with the same number, $100,000. Brad Carter's face had multiple color changes. That's impossible. I've put years of work into this company. Years of work that led to customer complaints, lawsuits, and bankruptcy. Brad, you're 7 weeks away from losing everything. He remained quiet for a long time, staring at my phone. How? How did you? Does it matter? Here's what I'm offering. $100,000 cash for 100% ownership. You can stay on as a project manager with a competitive salary. Project manager? It's my company. It was your company. Now it's just debt and bad reputation. Take the deal, Brad. Because it's the only one you're getting. Brad signed the paperwork 4 days later. He did not have a choice. It was either sell to me or file bankruptcy and lose everything. The transfer was quick and comprehensive. I retained the best personnel while letting go of the rest. I settled all outstanding obligations and lawsuits. Most significantly, I restructured everything to benefit customers rather than merely enriching the owner. Brad's first day as my employee was an educational experience for both of us. He arrived at his customary time, 10 a.m., because owners do not punch clocks, and went straight to his old corner office. I stopped him in the corridor. Good morning, Brad. Your workspace is over here. I escorted him to a desk in the main area, right in the center of everything. Where's my office? I converted it into a conference room, much better use of space. His company Audi was replaced by a standard work truck that everyone else drove. His spending account was canceled. His designated parking space became guest parking. But what really changed was his income, which dropped from $130,000 to $60,000. The same as the other project managers, which was rather generous given his recent performance. This is temporary, right? He inquired after I described his new remuneration arrangement. Until you see how valuable I am to operations? Brad, I responded. Your value to operations will determine everything about your employment here. Perform well and you'll be treated well. Underperform, and you'll be replaced. For the first time in our adult lives, Brad had to work for his money. While Brad adjusted to life as a regular employee, I made a few more changes. Rachel had always been brilliant with numbers and organization, but her skills were squandered cutting hair for tips and doing part-time bookkeeping for small businesses. I offered her the post of operations director at a salary that was double what she was earning at the salon. She nearly didn't trust me at first. I don't have experience running construction projects, she replied. You have experience managing a household on no budget, raising a child alone, and keeping multiple part-time jobs organized. Trust me, you're overqualified. Rachel proved to be just what the organization needed. She implemented project tracking systems, enhanced client communication, and managed to keep Brad from screwing up the work he was allocated. Watching Brad follow directions from our younger sister was perhaps the most satisfying aspect of my payback. For 34 years, he treated Rachel as if she were invisible, simply another family member who didn't matter. She was now his supervisor, and she outperformed him in every way. Rachel never misused her power, but she did not coddle him either. When Brad attempted to cut shortcuts on a project, Rachel shut it down. When he arrived late, she documented it. When he moaned about his new situation, she reminded him that having a job was preferable to unemployed. About 8 months into the new arrangement, Tyler began looking for opportunities. He'd heard through the family grapevine that I was doing well and had even launched a business. He came into the shop one morning with a resume printed on copy paper and what I can only describe as arrogant confidence. Thought you might need some extra hands, he remarked, peering around at the equipment and trucks. I've got some ideas for improving efficiency. Tyler's resume was an example of creative fiction. He identified entrepreneurial endeavors as his primary experience and portrayed his basement gaming setup as a remote digital marketing company. What exactly do you think you could contribute here? I was curious about. Well, I've been researching the industry and I think you're missing some key opportunities in the digital space. Social media marketing, online customer acquisition, that sort of thing. This comes from someone who has never kept a job for more than 3 months. Tyler, I replied, this is a construction and custom vehicle business. Our clients care about quality work, not hashtags. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps small businesses small, he said, seemingly unaware that he was scolding someone whose modest business was already more successful than anything he'd ever tried. I informed him that we were fully staffed and did not require further assistance. He departed disappointed, but not defeated. Tyler's optimism is invulnerable to reality. By month 10, Brad was suffering. The labor was more difficult than he remembered. The hours were longer than he was accustomed to, and the lack of special care was getting to him. Everything came to a head during a client meeting. Brad had promised a client that we would complete their project in half the time, evidently forgetting that he no longer had the ability to do so. When the client called to confirm the timetable, Rachel had to explain that Brad misrepresented our capabilities and that the realistic completion date was twice what he had claimed. The client wasn't pleased. They came into the business for a face-to-face encounter, and let's just say they aired their discontent loudly and clearly. Brad attempted to shift blame to miscommunication and new management practices, but it was evident to everyone there that he had simply lied to get the contract. After the client left, I summoned Brad to my office. "That was unacceptable," I replied. "Look, sometimes you have to tell clients what they want to hear to get the job. Then you figure out how to make it work." "No, Brad. Sometimes you have to tell clients the truth so they can make informed decisions. What you did was dishonest and unprofessional." "Since when do you lecture me about business? 10 months ago you were unemployed and desperate." There it was. The real Brad. The one who had been hiding behind false civility since I'd purchased his business. "And now I own a successful business while you're an employee who just cost us a client. Funny how things change." Brad's face turned red. "This is my company. I built this from nothing. You built this into nothing. I'm rebuilding it into something, and if you can't accept that, you're welcome to find employment elsewhere. You can't fire me. I'm your brother. I can fire anyone who doesn't do their job properly. Being my brother just means I gave you more chances than I'd give anyone else." Brad stormed out of my office and did not return for 4 days. When Brad eventually returned, he was different. The facade of cooperation had vanished, replaced by barely hidden hatred and disdain. He began arriving late on a regular basis. His work quality dropped. He began making nasty remarks to his coworkers about family enterprises and good breaks. Meanwhile, my parents had learned of the situation and were not pleased. They called me on a Tuesday evening, both using speakerphones for maximum impact. "What's this we hear about you humiliating your brother?" Janet Carter, Carter's mother, asked. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Brad says you bought his company just to torture him," Frank Carter, Brad's father, added. "Says you're making him work like a common laborer. Brad is working as a project manager, same as the other project managers. If he has complaints about his treatment, he can address them through proper channels." "This is ridiculous," Mom stated. "We should support each other, not tear each other down." The irony was so thick that I could have sliced it with a knife. "You're absolutely right, Mom. Families should support each other. Where was that support when I was sleeping in my truck? Where was it when I needed help with basic transportation to keep working? That was different." "No, it wasn't. The only difference is that now I have the power to help, or not help. And I'm choosing to base that decision on how I was treated when I had nothing." Dad's voice became severe. "You're being petty and vindictive. I'm being consistent. Brad is still employed, still earning a living wage, still has opportunities to prove himself. That's more support than I ever received from this family." The debate ended horribly, with my parents maintaining that I was destroying the family, while I pointed out that it had already been ruined by years of favoritism and neglect. Brad endured another month before reaching his breaking point. He entered my office on a Friday afternoon with an ultimatum. "I want my old role back," he declared. "Full authority, executive salary, company car. This experiment has gone on long enough." I leaned back in my chair and observed him. He appeared tired, dejected, but still entitled. "What experiment? This whole thing where you pretend to be the boss? We both know I'm the one with the experience and connections. Give me back control and I'll consider letting you stay on as a partner." The audacity was breathtaking. Even in loss, Brad couldn't conceive a world where he wasn't at the center. "Brad," I whispered. "Let me make sure I understand. You want me to give you back the company I bought from you, restore the salary and benefits that were bankrupting the business, and accept a junior role in the company I've spent 10 months rebuilding? When you put it like that, it sounds unreasonable." "It doesn't just sound unreasonable, Brad. It is unreasonable. Here's what I'm prepared to offer. You can continue working here as a project manager, following the same rules as everyone else, or you can find employment elsewhere. Those are your options." Brad's expression shifted between fury, incredulity, desperation, and resignation. "You really think you're better than me now, don't you? I think I'm more successful than you now. Whether that makes me better is a different question. This isn't over," he muttered, heading for the exit. "Actually, Brad, it is. And if you decide to leave, don't expect a reference letter. Brad went out that day and never returned. He didn't even tidy up his desk, just vanished like a poor employee who knows he's about to be fired. I learned from family members that he had obtained work at a competing construction company, but only as a basic site supervisor, earning about half of what I was paying him. His girlfriend, who had been drawn to his achievement, allegedly concluded that dating a middle management employee was less enticing than dating a business owner. Within 3 months, Brad had relocated into a smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. His social media presence, which was once full of humble brags and fancy purchases, has gone completely silent. I didn't feel anything. There was no gratification or regret, only the quiet comfort of a problem that had fixed itself. 9 months later, my parents attempted one last intervention. They invited me to Sunday dinner, the first invitation I'd had in over 2 years, and set me down for what they likely expected to be a come-to-Jesus conversation. "Brad's struggling," Mom added. "His health is suffering from the stress. He's lost weight. Looks tired all the time." Dad went on to say, "This feud needs to end." "There's no feud," I said. "Brad made choices, and those choices had consequences. He's free to make different choices anytime he wants." "You could rehire him," Mom said. "Give him another chance." I gave him several chances. He chose not to take advantage of them. "But he's family," she added, as if that magical word would fix everything. "So am I," I said. "So is Rachel." Funny how being family didn't matter when I needed help. But suddenly it's important now that Brad needs help. They attempted numerous additional approaches: guilt, obligation, and family unity. But nothing worked. Finally, Dad used what he felt was his trump card. "We're disappointed in you," he stated. "This isn't how we raised you." "You're right," I replied. "You raised me to accept whatever scraps I was thrown and be grateful for them. You raised me to believe that my needs didn't matter as long as Brad was taken care of. But somewhere along the way, I learned that I deserved better. I left the dinner early and haven't returned since." While Brad struggled to adjust to his new life, Rachel thrived. She'd adapted to corporate management like a pro, developing processes and procedures that enhanced our efficiency by 35% in the first year. Lily was succeeding at her new school, making new friends and participating in activities that would have been difficult in their previous position. Rachel had enrolled in some business classes at the community college and was considering obtaining a degree. "I never thought I was smart enough for college," she confessed one day. "Growing up, I always felt like the dumb one compared to you and Brad." "You were never the dumb one," I told you. "You were just the one nobody invested in." Rachel is already earning more than Brad ever did. She owns a house outright.